Once we had the 2008 crash, I think there was far greater scrutiny, and to some extent the Brexit debate is proxy for this, on the huge challenges of inequality and social mobility that exists in the UK. And so the work that I did following being Higher Education Minister is to ask questions, because it's important to understand that British taxpayers fund these universities to a huge extent in terms of their research grants. In fact, those two universities get more than the rest of our university sectors combined. And it's to say, well, look, if British taxpayers fund it, it's legitimate to ask questions about who gets to go. When I became Higher Education Minister under Gordon Brown, when he was Prime Minister in the UK, I was shocked, frankly, when I found out that whilst we'd made huge progress on black and ethnic minority students going to university, and indeed working class students from all backgrounds, they were concentrated at a small number of universities that often were not very high up the league tables, to be honest. And so I started to focus on fair access. And I guess I knew where the bodies were buried. And so I did think it was important to challenge Oxford and Cambridge about who gets to go on issues of race, of class and socioeconomic backgrounds. The figures are very, very worrying. 82% from the top two social classes, the children of prime ministers, newspaper editors, judges. And it's still the case today that there are colleges going 3, 4, 5 years without admitting a single black student. I'm very pleased that finally the universities seem to be waking up to this. They're now announcing a foundation year. But what we aren't seeing from either university is centralised admissions, which really allows the university to focus hard on those who are weaker and less keen to participate in fair access. And also, I think, the understanding that there is a difference between being elite, which we celebrate, and being elitist, which is really about pulling up the drawbridge under you and having a certain kind of students, usually from British private schools, which you tend to suggest is where academic excellence is found. I think it's extraordinary that universities are now coming under attack for what people are calling a kind of identity politics or a political correctness. The truth is, our elite global universities historically have largely been small c conservative institutions where the dominant narrative has been a white, male, privileged narrative, the people that wrote the history books, the people that dictated the economy. That has been the narrative. We're in an age where after the arc of the 20th century, where at the beginning of that century, women, ethnic minorities, working men and women, and certainly anyone who was LGBTQ, were subjugated. By the end of that century, of course, are identifying, self-actualizing in their own time and their own lifetime. That's a great, great thing. And that the space now has to be shared with those folk is causing a little bit of worry and concern. It doesn't worry and concern me. Look, universities absolutely have to be institutions that warn us also about our history. And the populism that we're seeing across much of the world, hard right in nature, hostile to difference, hostile to immigrants, I believe needs to at least historically be analysed for the problematic context that it creates. It's also right to say that we mustn't create a context in which we pit certain communities against others. So, look, universities will take some flack. Of course they will. They have to be forums where everybody can make comment and have their say. I don't see them as in the pockets, if you like, of kind of liberal progressives. I just don't recognise that. The real issues are the fourth and fifth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence, the loss of jobs, and the need for skills. The real issues are rampant inequality, stretching societies, and often in developed economies creating an underclass. Those are the real issues affecting people's lives, and universities have to be present in those debates because there's a group of charlatans out there who say that the real issues are that immigrants are arriving and taking your jobs. The real issues are setting up barriers in a global economy to protect yourself from the rise of China, particularly India, and other countries, which will certainly be the case by the middle of this century. So I think that universities play an important role because in an age of populism, it can only be that higher education loses out. And by the way, even if you don't see some of these populist characters in my own country, the United States, parts of Europe, Brazil and other places, even if you don't recognise them as dangerous as they were last time round in the 1920s and 30s, be under no doubt that they could well breed another generation that take things even further. So this is a time for those of intellect, academic ability, those who can reach into an academic canon to stand brave and tall and communicate quite strongly the dangers that could lie ahead for the global world.